There's a date I can't stop looking at, October 19th, 2021. That's the day a complaint was filed in Gallia County, Ohio. Not by police, not by the Attorney General's office. None of that existed yet. Not for this family, not for another 4.5 years. This was a school attendance officer, a truancy complaint. 6 Siders children, all enrolled at a school called Attaville Elementary in the Gallia County Local School District. And the complaint said something simple, something almost administrative, if you didn't know what it would turn into later. These 6 kids hadn't attended a single day of school, not one, the entire year. Now, I want you to hold that date in your head, October 19th, 2021, because everything I'm about to walk you through only makes sense if you keep coming back to it. What happened to that truancy case? It got dismissed. Not because the family showed up and explained themselves, not because a judge decided there was nothing to it. It was dismissed, according to records obtained by NBC4, in part because the family could not be served, because they had, by that point, likely already moved. So, a school district tries to hold this family accountable for 6 children who never once walked through a classroom door. And by the time anyone official goes looking for them, they're gone. Here's where it gets specific. Here's where it stops being a vague, the family moved a lot story and becomes something with an actual paper trail. 4 months later, February 2022. 2 of the 16 children who would eventually be pulled out of that Hamden house, twins, were born on the same day. NBC4's reporters went digging for the birth records. They could only obtain one of the 2 certificates, the others sealed or unavailable for reasons that weren't explained. But the one they got, the one they could actually read, lists an address. Not in Gallia County, not in Cheshire, not anywhere in southeastern Ohio where this family had lived, as far as anyone can tell, for basically their entire married life together. Bloomer, Wisconsin. I had to look at a map the first time I saw that. Bloomer, Wisconsin it's not close. It's not a short drive. It's Chippewa County, way up in the northwest part of the state, hours from anything connected to this case before or after. And here's the detail that, honestly, stopped me cold when I read it. Property records for that Wisconsin address describe it as a miscellaneous agricultural property. No residential structure listed, which means, as far as the county's own records are concerned, there was no house there, nothing built for people to actually live in. Chippewa County officials were asked directly whether they had any record of this family, any calls to that address, any visits, anything at all connecting the Siders to that piece of land. They said no, nothing. So, somewhere, on a government document, a birth certificate, one of the most basic, most consequential pieces of paperwork a person can have, there's an address that, according to the county where it's located, never had a residence on it, and never had any official contact with this family whatsoever. I don't know what you do with that. I've sat with it for a while now, and I keep landing in the same place. Either that address was a mistake, a clerical error, something copied down wrong at a hospital intake desk in a hurry, or it was something else. Something written down because it needed to be written down. Because a birth record legally requires a home address. And the actual truth of where this family was living, or hiding, in February of 2022, wasn't something anyone involved wanted attached to a government form. I'm not going to tell you which one it is. I can't. Nobody's confirmed that, and I'm not going to manufacture certainty I don't have, even for a detail this strange. What I can tell you, and this part isn't speculation, this is just following the paperwork in order, is that this Wisconsin address appears exactly once. One time. In the entire span of records reporters have pulled together, covering nearly 2 decades of this family's life. Every other birth, every other document, every other address, all of it sits inside a cluster of counties in southeastern Ohio. Gallia, Athens, Vinton, eventually, except this one. This single entry sitting right in the gap between a dismissed truancy case in October 2021 and the next confirmed Ohio address showing up again by November 2022. 14 months. That's roughly the window. A truancy officer starts asking where 6 children are. The case dies because nobody can find the family to serve them. And somewhere in the middle of that stretch, a birth certificate places them 8-9 hours away on a plot of land the county says never had a house on it. Then, by the time the next child is born, back in Ohio, back in Cheshire, like nothing happened. I keep asking myself the same question, over and over, and I don't think I'm the only one. What does a family do in the exact window when a school district is trying to track them down for 6 kids who've never once been in a classroom? That involves suddenly appearing, on paper, in rural Wisconsin, on a property with no house, and then, just as suddenly, disappearing from there and reappearing back in Ohio? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a prosecutor. I'm not standing in front of you telling you this is a confirmed fact, proven, Exhibit A in a courtroom kind of thing. Nobody in Vinton County has stood up and used the word flight about this Wisconsin address. Not publicly, not that I've found. But I don't think you need a prosecutor to notice a pattern this specific. A truancy complaint. A dismissal because the family couldn't be located. And then, dead center in the gap where they supposedly couldn't be found. An address shows up in the record, just not one that leads anywhere real. Let's talk about what we do know for certain, because I think it's important to separate the parts of this that are documented from the parts that are just deeply, deeply suspicious timing. What's documented? The truancy complaint, filed October 19, 2021, against Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders, for 6 children enrolled at Attaville Elementary who never attended. What's documented? That case being dismissed, at least in part, because the family had apparently already relocated and could not be served with the necessary paperwork. What's documented? A birth certificate obtained through public records by NBC4, dated February 2022, listing a Wisconsin address for one of a set of twins. What's documented? That address corresponding to a property with no residential structure on it, according to Chippewa County's own records. What's documented? Chippewa County having 0 record. No calls, no visits, nothing, connecting this family to that location in any real, lived-in sense. What's documented? Every single other address on record for this family, before and after, sitting inside a tight cluster of counties in southeastern Ohio. That's the paper trail. That's not me building a theory out of thin air. That's 5 separate, verifiable facts, sitting next to each other, in the order they actually happened. What I'm not going to do is tell you those facts add up to a legal conclusion, because they don't, not on their own, not without someone in an actual courtroom formally connecting them. But I also think it would be dishonest of me to pretend those 5 facts, laid out next to each other like that, don't tell a story of their own, even without anyone saying the word flight out loud. I want to back up for a second, because I think there's a version of this that gets lost if we just stay zoomed in on Wisconsin. This family, and I've covered pieces of this before, so I won't retread the whole thing, had spent close to 2 decades, according to investigators, moving through address after address, largely avoiding the kind of medical and government paper trail that normally accumulates around a family with this many children. Gallia County, then a home near Cheshire, then eventually Hamden in Vinton County, where all of this ended on June 30th. But the Wisconsin entry is different from the others. The Ohio moves, Gallia to Cheshire to Hamden, those at least correspond to actual addresses, actual homes, even if the conditions inside them were, according to officials, some of the worst investigators say they've ever documented. Wisconsin is the one entry that doesn't correspond to an actual place to live. It's the one entry that looks, on paper, less like "we moved" and more like "we needed something to write down." A relative of the family, Ronnie Fletcher, he's married to one of Gary Sr. and Christina's daughters, spoke to a local station after the arrests. He said he and his wife were horrified, said they had no idea the situation inside that home had spiraled the way it apparently had. I bring that up not because it relates directly to Wisconsin, but because it tells you something about how compartmentalized this family's life seems to have been. Even people who were related to them, even people close enough to be called family, say they didn't know, didn't see it, weren't told. If your own in-laws didn't know where you actually were or what was actually happening inside your home across almost 20 years, it starts to make a little more sense how a single false-looking address on a single birth certificate could slip by, unnoticed, until reporters went digging through records that most people never think to request. There's a neighbor, too, Melissa Edmonds, who lived down the street from the Gallia County property the family eventually left behind. She told a reporter that the house just went empty one day. No warning, no goodbye. Just, in her words, an empty house, left a mess, not in great condition. She said her sister-in-law's kids had talked to some of the Siders children a few years back, but that even they didn't really know them. Not in any real way. That's the pattern, over and over, across every county this family touched. People at the edges, neighbors, distant relatives, store employees, catching glimpses. A child in a Dollar General. A house that used to have cars in the driveway and then didn't. Nobody with the full picture. Nobody able to say, with confidence, here's where they actually are. Here's who these kids actually are. And into that pattern, you drop a birth certificate with an address in rural Wisconsin, on a piece of land that, according to the county, was never anything more than agricultural property. I don't think that's a coincidence. I want to be careful with that sentence because I don't think that's a coincidence is doing a lot of work. And I don't want you to hear it as I've solved something. I haven't. Nobody has. Not officially. What I mean is, when you line up a truancy complaint, a dismissal because the family vanished, and a document placing them somewhere that, as far as the local government's concerned, doesn't actually exist as a place to live. The odds that all three of those things just happen to occur, back to back, for entirely unrelated reasons, start to feel very small to me. Now here's where I have to be honest with you about the limits of what's publicly known right now. This case, as you probably already know if you've been following it, is currently under a gag order. Filed in mid-July on behalf of one of the defendants, and later joined by attorneys for others. It restricts prosecutors, law enforcement, and defense attorneys from speaking publicly about ongoing aspects of the investigation. That means, going forward, the flow of new official information, statements from the Attorney General's office, from the sheriff, from the special prosecutors, has slowed down considerably compared to those first chaotic weeks in July. All four defendants have also, at this point, requested competency evaluations. I've covered that separately, and I'm not going to walk back through all of it here, because I don't want to repeat myself. But it's relevant context for why something like this Wisconsin address hasn't necessarily been front and center in every headline. The legal conversation right now is largely consumed by a different question: whether these 4 people are even currently fit to stand trial at all, whether they understood, at the time, what they were doing. Which makes the Wisconsin question even more interesting to me, honestly. Because a fake-looking address on a legal document timed almost perfectly with evading a truancy officer. That's not confusion. That's not somebody who doesn't understand what's happening around them. If anything, that kind of maneuver, showing up on paper somewhere far away, right when someone official starts looking for you, and then quietly reappearing back home once the case falls apart, that takes a level of awareness, of intention. Whether that awareness came from one person in this family, or several, or all of them together, that's something a jury, someday, is going to have to work through. Not me, not you. I keep going back to the word running. I know it's in the title of this video, and I want to be upfront about why. Nobody official has used that word yet. I haven't found a single court filing, a single press conference, a single statement from the Attorney General's office that formally characterizes this Wisconsin entry as an act of evasion. I want to say that clearly, because I don't want you walking away from this thinking there's a confirmed legal finding here. There isn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever, depending on whether this detail even ends up being relevant to the criminal charges these 4 are actually facing, which are about the conditions those 16 children were living in, not about a truancy case from years earlier. But when I look at those 5 documented facts side by side, the complaint, the dismissal, the phantom address, the empty property, the quiet return to Ohio, I don't think running is an unreasonable word for a viewer to land on. I think it's the word most people would land on, looking at the same paper trail I just walked you through. I just want you to know exactly where the documented facts end and where the interpretation, yours, mine, anyone's, begins. That's the responsible way to tell you this story. Not pretending I know more than I do. Not pretending the county records prove a legal case that hasn't been made. Just showing you the dates, in order, and letting you sit with what they add up to. Where things stand right now, the criminal case in Vinton County continues to move through the competency evaluation process for all 4 defendants. The gag order remains in place, limiting new official statements. And as far as public record shows, no additional charges have been filed relating specifically to the truancy case, the Wisconsin address, or the period between late 2021 and late 2022. Whether that period becomes part of the broader case, whether prosecutors decide the pattern of movement itself is relevant to proving the prolonged nature of the neglect the Attorney General's office has already described, that's something we don't know yet either. I'll say the same thing I always end up saying with this case, because I think it matters more here than almost anywhere else. Gary Siders Sr., Christina Siders, Gary Siders Jr., Elizabeth Siders. All 4 are still, legally, presumed innocent of the 16 counts each of them is currently facing. A strange address on a birth certificate doesn't change that. A dismissed truancy case from 2021 doesn't change that. Those are pieces of a much larger picture, and pieces aren't verdicts. But pieces are worth looking at closely. That's kind of the whole point of doing this the right way, not skipping past the parts of the record that are inconvenient or confusing or don't fit neatly into a 5-minute headline. Sitting with a birth certificate from February 2022 and a county in Wisconsin saying they have no idea who these people are and just asking the obvious question, why there? Why then? And why did it only happen once? I don't have the answer. I don't think anyone outside this family does, not yet. But I think it's a question worth asking out loud, on the record, in front of you, instead of letting it sit buried in a public records request that most people will never think to file. If you want to keep following this case as the real documents come out, not the rumors, not the speculation, just what's actually sitting in county archives and court filings. That's what this channel does. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and we'll be back the moment there's something new and verified to walk through with you.